You know, there's a curious thing about being human. From the moment we can form words, we begin asking the same question in 1,000 disguises. Who am I? We chase it through religion, through science, through philosophy and psychology, through careers and relationships. And yet the more earnestly we seek, the more elusive it becomes. The harder we try to find the self, the more it slips through our fingers like water trying to grasp itself. We live as if this I, this center of experience, was something we could locate, tucked somewhere behind the eyes perhaps, or inside the chest, where we feel the pulse of life. And yet if you look closely, if you really turn attention upon the one who is looking, you never quite catch it. You find sensations, thoughts, memories, desires, all flowing and changing. But the me that supposedly owns them is nowhere to be found. This is, of course, profoundly unsettling to the ordinary mind, which insists that there must be someone in charge. So we spend our lives reinforcing the illusion, building identities out of nationality, belief, profession, gender, success, failure, a fragile fortress of definitions meant to convince us that the self is real, enduring, substantial. But beneath all of it, there lingers that quiet question, if I am all these things, why do I keep changing? You see, the sense of being a separate I is one of nature's most magnificent tricks. It's the universe pretending to be divided so that it can play the game of relationship, subject and object, lover and beloved, seeker and sought. The cosmos hides itself in you, just to have the delight of finding itself again. And the grand irony is that the seeker and the sought are the same process, looking at itself from two sides of a mirror. Today we are going to look at one of the most intriguing doors through which people have glimpsed this truth. The doorway opened by the humble mushroom, that ancient companion of humankind. It has been called sacred, feared as dangerous, and dismissed as hallucinatory. But what it reveals is not fantasy. It is the collapse of fantasy. For when the curtain of the self falls away, you discover that the stage and the actor were never two. But before we step through that doorway, I want you to see something simple and astonishing. Every search you have ever made for knowledge, for love, for God, was the universe searching for itself through the form of you. And perhaps, just perhaps, what you call awakening is not the discovery of something new, but the remembering of what was never forgotten. So let us begin, not as students chasing answers, but as awareness turning gently toward its own face. The search for the self ends not in revelation, but in recognition that what you have been seeking has always been the one who is looking. You see, my dear friends, the grandest illusion ever staged is the one you are performing right now. The illusion of being someone in particular. You have been practicing it for so long that you take it quite seriously. You wake up in the morning and, like an actor returning to the stage, you put on the costume of your name, your memories, your habits, and you say, ah, yes, this is me. But this me, this self you defend and polish, is rather like the front page of a newspaper constantly being printed, constantly replaced, and yet you imagine it's permanent. The ego, that precious sense of being a little manager inside your head, is not an entity at all. It's a social convention, a conversation that your parents and teachers started long ago when they pointed at you and said, that's you, and you believed them. Now, there's nothing wrong with the game. It's necessary for the dance of life. Without the illusion of being someone, there would be no drama, no story, no play, but trouble begins when the actor forgets it's a play and begins to think the mask is his face. When that happens, fear is born, fear of death, fear of failure, fear of losing control. For the mask is fragile, and everything fragile must defend itself. And so we live in a curious state of tension, constantly trying to protect this imaginary boundary that separates me from not me. We say, this is my body, my mind, my idea, my success. But have you ever stopped to ask where you end and the rest of the universe begins? Is it at the skin? The air you breathe was a tree a few moments ago, and the tree was sunlight and rain before that. So, where is the line, really? The truth is, there never was a line. The self, the body, the world, they are one continuous event, like a wave rising and falling in the ocean. The wave thinks it's separate only until it looks down and realizes, why, I am made of water. I've never been apart from the sea. The mushroom, in its own peculiar wisdom, reveals this by dissolving the boundaries we mistake for truth. Under its influence, the edges blur, the center disappears, and for a fleeting eternity you see not as a person peering out at the world, but as the world peering in upon itself. The actor realizes the stage was never outside him. The dreamer awakens to find he was the dream all along. It is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because the mask you clung to melts away, and liberating because what remains cannot die. What you discover is not that you are nothing, but that you are everything. The great trick of identity is that it convinces infinity that it is finite, eternity that it is temporary, and the boundless that it is a body. And yet, the moment the trick is seen through, the laughter begins not cruel laughter, but cosmic laughter, like the sound of the ocean remembering its own rhythm. So, before we wander further into the forest of consciousness, remember this: the self you've been protecting all your life is a story told by the universe for its own amusement. When the story ends, nothing is lost. The teller and the tale were never two. You know, when we look at the world with the eyes of separation, we tend to imagine that human beings stand at the top of some evolutionary ladder, proud, intelligent, and terribly important. But the more we learn about life, the more it becomes delightfully clear that intelligence has been everywhere all along, quietly humming beneath our feet. Take the mushroom, for instance. Most people think of it as a small, curious plant popping up after the rain. But that's only the fruit, the brief blossoming of a being far older and wiser than we imagine. Beneath the soil lies the true organism, a vast network of threads called mycelium, stretching through the earth like veins of awareness, linking tree to tree, plant to plant, life to life. It doesn't simply grow in the forest, it is the forest, communicating, nourishing, recycling, remembering. When you walk through the woods, you are treading on a living web, an organic internet billions of years old. And in some sense, you are that web. You eat from it, breathe from it, and eventually return to it. The mycelium reminds us that individuality is a convenience of perception, not a fact of existence. Each mushroom, like each person, appears to be separate only because the rest of it is hidden. The ancients knew this, though they used other words. They spoke of the world tree, of roots that connect all living things, of the serpent of eternity that devours its own tail. They understood, intuitively, that life is not a collection of objects, but a single organism expressing itself in infinite patterns. When you ingest the sacred mushroom, or even when you simply sit in silence and listen to nature, that hidden truth begins to shine through. The boundary between self and soil softens. Your breath feels less like yours and more like the forest breathing through you. The pulse in your veins beats in rhythm with the hum of insects, the flow of rivers, the rotation of the planet. You realize you are not on Earth. You are Earth, briefly aware of itself. And isn't it marvelous that a simple fungus, something that feeds on decay, should become the teacher of unity. Out of death, it creates life. Out of rot, renewal. It's as if the cosmos is saying, even in disintegration, I am whole. The mycelium does not cling, does not hoard, does not fear ending, because it knows that ending is just the beginning seen from the other side. This is the lesson that awaits anyone who dares to see with clear eyes, that consciousness is not confined to a skull, nor life to a body, nor wisdom to the human tongue. Everything speaks. Everything participates in this grand conversation, from the galaxies spinning above to the bacteria turning in your gut. The same intelligence moves through all of it, one song played on countless instruments. And so, when the mushroom whispers its wordless teaching, it is not delivering something new, it is reminding you of what you've always known but somehow forgot, that you are woven into the very fabric of existence. You've never stood apart. You've never been alone. There comes a moment, sooner or later, when the little self can no longer hold its shape. Perhaps it happens in meditation, or in a moment of love so vast that you forget to defend yourself, or in the shimmering, dreamlike opening brought on by the sacred mushroom. However it arrives, it feels at first like dying. You see, the ego believes that it is the pilot of this craft, the commander at the controls. So when it begins to dissolve, panic arises. The mind shouts, "Wait, who's steering?" But no one ever was. The body breathes itself, the heart beats itself, the stars burn themselves. Life has never needed your permission to happen. When the wave recognizes that it has no edge, it doesn't vanish into despair, it sighs with relief. It realizes that its rise and fall were never separate from the ocean's motion. In that recognition, the effort to stay afloat disappears. You simply flow. This is what people call ego death, but it's not really death. Nothing perishes. What ends is only the hallucination of being apart. The boundaries soften, and suddenly, instead of you looking at the world, there is only seeing pure experience without a center. The eyes still open, but they belong to no one in particular. Sound moves through air and finds no listener. For listener and sound are the same vibration. It can feel like falling endlessly into nothing, until you realize there is no bottom, because there is no down. There is only being, and being has no opposite. The fear that arises is only the last echo of the ego defending its territory. Once you stop fighting, you discover that the nothing you're falling into is everything you've ever loved. Imagine a drop of water trembling on the edge of a leaf. For a moment, it clings to its individuality, terrified of the fall. But when it finally lets go, it doesn't disappear, it returns to the river from which it came. The journey was never exile, it was adventure. The drop was never apart from the river. It was the river exploring itself as a drop. In this moment of dissolution, clarity dawns. You see that consciousness is not in the body is in consciousness. Space and time are not containers for your life, they are ripples in the awareness that you are. When that is seen, there is no more struggle, no more question of control. Everything is moving of its own accord, perfectly spontaneous, perfectly complete. And the greatest surprise is not that you have lost yourself, but that you were never truly found, because what you call self was simply the play of waves upon the sea. The ocean is still here, deeper and more peaceful than ever, smiling through every crest, whispering through every current, endlessly becoming and dissolving, yet never beginning, never ending. It's rather delightful, you know, that after centuries of measuring, dissecting, and theorizing, science has found itself standing once again at the doors of mystery. It set out to explain the universe, to break it down into manageable pieces, and instead it discovered that the deeper it looked, the less there was to hold on to. Matter dissolved into energy, energy into probability, probability into consciousness itself, and suddenly the scientists found themselves talking like poets and mystics. When you peer far enough into the atom, you find no solid thing, only relationships, patterns, vibrations, dancing without a dancer. It is as if the universe were a thought thinking itself, an infinite mind dreaming in symbols of light. The old mechanical model, the clockwork cosmos, gave us the comfort of predictability. But modern physics whispers something far more elegant, that the observer and the observed are one process. The act of seeing participates in what is seen. And here, at last, the laboratory meets the monastery. For what the physicist describes mathematically, the mystic has always known intuitively that consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of the brain, but the very field from which all phenomena arise. The instruments of science measure waves and particles, but the real miracle is the awareness that knows it is measuring. In the study of the brain, they have found something wonderfully paradoxical: the default mode network, that humming orchestra of self-referential thought, quiets during meditation, during flow, and yes, under the influence of psychedelics. When the conductor sits down, the music doesn't stop. It simply changes key. The noise of me subsides, and what remains is a vast silence that is somehow full of everything. Now, the scientists describe this as the brain losing its hierarchy, its ordinary pattern of control. But from the perspective of the awakened mind, it's not that the system has broken down, it has broken open. Life is finally free to flow without the bottleneck of a self trying to steer it. It's amusing, isn't it? For centuries, religion told us to surrender to God. Science told us to master nature. Yet both are now discovering the same thing, that mastery and surrender are not opposites, but reflections of a single movement. To surrender to life is to participate consciously in its unfolding. When consciousness studies itself, it finds no edge, no border, no ultimate particle to grasp. Every experiment leads back to the same place, the observer. And when the observer looks for itself, it vanishes, like a flame that can't burn its own light. This is not a failure of inquiry. It's the fulfillment of it. The sages spoke of awakening. The scientists speak of emergence. The language differs, but the realization is the same. That reality is not a collection of separate things, but a single event, self-aware, self-expressing, endlessly creative. The universe is not a machine, it's a miracle in motion. And so, my friends, the walls between science and spirit crumble not in conflict, but in laughter. For both have been walking the same path, tracing different spirals around the same still center, the mystery of being aware at all. You see, there is a very old habit within us, the habit of clinging. We clutch at certainty, at control, at identity, as though life were a horse that might throw us off if we dared to relax. And yet, all the while, we are trying to control something we never truly grasped to begin with. From the moment we are born, we are taught that safety lies in mastery. Learn the rules, hold the reins, steer the course. But the more tightly we grip, the more anxious we become. Because deep down, there's a tiny whisper that knows we are not steering this thing at all. It's quite a shock, isn't it, to realize that you don't decide your next thought, that your heart beats, your breath flows, your cells divide, all without a central authority, taking minutes and issuing commands. And yet we pretend there's someone in charge, a little homunculus sitting behind the eyes, pulling the levers of life. That little controller, that I, who claims authorship of everything, it's a marvelous illusion. And it's necessary, to a degree. You need a self to buy groceries, to sign your name, to navigate the social world. But the tragedy begins when the temporary tool becomes the tyrant, when the servant starts imagining itself the master of the universe. So when life, or perhaps the mushroom, comes along and whispers, Let go. We resist. We tighten our fists. If I let go, we say, everything will fall apart. But what is it exactly that's holding everything together? Is it you? Were you keeping the planet spinning? Were you orchestrating the heartbeat of the world? The truth is, the universe has been doing quite fine without your management. The tides rise, the stars burn, the seasons turn, all in perfect order, without a supervisor. You are part of that order, not its overseer. The breath you think you are taking is the atmosphere breathing itself through you. And yet, this fear of surrender runs deep because we mistake letting go for losing control. But there is no control to lose. There is only the realization that control was never there. To let go is not to become passive. It is to move with life instead of against it. When you stop struggling to hold the river in your hands, you finally learn to swim. The current doesn't drown you, it carries you. You discover that effort was the real resistance all along. Think of a dancer. If she tries too hard to control every movement, the dance becomes mechanical, lifeless. But when she trusts the rhythm, her body moves effortlessly, guided by something larger than thought. That something is life itself, and it's dancing you too. The ego fears that surrender means annihilation. But surrender doesn't destroy you. It reveals that what you thought you were never existed. It shows that you were the dance, not the dancer, the song, not the singer. And in that moment of release, that exquisite dropping away, there comes a peace so profound it doesn't even need the name peace, because there's no one left to own it, to chase it, to lose it. There is only the stillness that was always here, patiently waiting for you to stop fighting the flow. So, don't be afraid to let go. You will not fall into nothing. You will fall into everything. Now, after such a profound experience, whether it comes from meditation, from love, or from the whispering chemistry of the mushroom, there arises a very human question. What now? For it's one thing to glimpse eternity, but quite another to wash the dishes afterward. The universe may have revealed itself as your own mind, but you still have to pay the bills, feed the cat, and find your shoes in the morning. And this is where the real art begins, the art of returning. You see, enlightenment is not an escape from life. It's the full participation in it, without the needless commentary. The mountain peak is not meant to be lived on. It's meant to give you perspective. Once you've seen the view, you come down to the valley and live among the people with laughter, with compassion, with the understanding that everyone you meet is another face of the same mystery you saw up there in the clouds. Integration, then, is remembering what you saw when you forget. It's learning to carry that clarity into the small things, the way you eat, the way you listen, the way you breathe. It's discovering that enlightenment is not a permanent high, but a quiet intimacy with whatever appears, even boredom, even grief, even the next traffic jam. Most seekers, make a mistake. They try to cling to the experience, to bottle the infinite, and keep it as a souvenir. But that's like trying to pin a butterfly to the wall. You preserve the form and lose the life. The point was never to stay dissolved in light. It was to recognize that the light never left. So, when you come down from that shimmering vision, don't mourn it, don't chase it. Let it flow through you the way water runs through a riverbed, carving patience into the stones. In time, the extraordinary becomes ordinary. And that is the most extraordinary thing of all, to find wonder in the very texture of the mundane. You may notice that after such awakenings, your values begin to shift quietly. You are less impressed by the noise of ambition and more enchanted by the simplicity of being. You laugh more easily. You cry more freely. You begin to see that joy is not a result of circumstances, but a recognition, a remembering that everything, absolutely everything, is included in the dance. And so the awakened person doesn't float above life, untouchable and aloof. They live it more deeply. They chop wood and carry water, as the old Zen saying goes. But now they know the wood and the water are themselves divine. Even the smallest act, tying your shoes, sipping tea, folding a blanket, becomes a continuation of the revelation, because the revelation was never about visions and ecstasies. It was about seeing the sacred where you once saw only the ordinary. The true test of awakening is not how high you climb, but how kindly you walk when your feet touch the ground again. You see, once the illusion of separateness fades, even for a moment, something remarkable begins to blossom. Compassion ceases to be an effort. Morality ceases to be a rule. You no longer have to try to love your neighbor, because you suddenly see that there are no neighbors, only yourself in another disguise. When the boundaries melt, when you look upon a tree and see your own breathing reflected in its leaves, the old question, why should I care, simply dissolves. The answer isn't moral. It's obvious. You care because you are it. The river that quenches your thirst is the same current that runs in your veins. The sunlight you bathe in this morning is still shining, transfigured, as the warmth in your chest. This recognition, this deep seeing, is the root of all true ethics. It doesn't come from commandments carved in stone. It flows naturally from the experience of unity. For if you are the world, then to harm the world is to harm yourself. And to heal it is to return yourself to wholeness. The mushroom, that subtle teacher, makes this plain. In its quiet wisdom, it does not preach or command. It shows. It shows the reciprocity of life, how decay nourishes birth, how death feeds the soil, how everything that falls apart is merely changing shape to feed the next becoming. When you see this, reverence awakens of its own accord. You don't need to be told to respect nature. You feel her pulse as your own heartbeat. And so, after the dissolving of the self, there arises a new kind of intelligence, not the cunning of the separate ego, but the sensitivity of the whole. Decisions are no longer made from fear or greed, but from the spontaneous intuition of connection. You don't save the world because you're supposed to. You save it because you can't not. When the rain falls, you know it is blessing you. When you hear the wind, you hear the planet breathing. And when another person suffers, you recognize that it is your own consciousness tasting a particular flavor of experience. Out of that recognition grows compassion, not pity, but understanding, not obligation, but love, the ecological awareness of our time, the realization that we are interdependent beings woven into a fragile web, is, in truth, a spiritual awakening in disguise. The scientists tell us about ecosystems. The mystics speak of oneness, and they are describing the same revelation from two sides of the same mirror. So you see, there is no need to choose between saving yourself and saving the world. They are one motion. The awakened life is simply the natural expression of sanity, to live gently, to consume less, to give more, to celebrate the miracle of being conscious at all. When you realize you are not a guest here, but the earth itself, dreaming of humanity, gratitude becomes your native language. You walk softly, you speak kindly, and you see the divine shimmering in the smallest things, in the curl of a fern, the laughter of a child, the stillness between two breaths. And in that quiet reverence, ethics and ecology meet not as duties, but as joy. There comes a time, you see, when one realizes that the teacher was never the mushroom, or the meditation technique, or the sacred text. The teacher was always life itself, disguised in whatever form would finally make you listen. Psychedelics, prayer, philosophy, these are only doorways. They can show you the threshold, but they cannot walk you through it. For the real transformation is not in the chemistry of the brain, it is in the clarity of perception. The mushroom may open the window, but you are the view. Many people having glimpsed that vastness through the aid of a substance, become understandably enchanted. They chase the experience, hoping to return to the mountaintop again and again. But what they forget is that the mountain was never a place. It was a perspective. What you saw there wasn't a new world. It was this one, seen without the filters of your habitual mind. So the wise traveler does not keep taking the same road in search of the same view. Once you've seen it, you don't need the map anymore. As I've said before, once you've heard the message, hang up the phone. The message is simple. You are it. You are the rhythm, the pattern, the energy that all things express. And that realization, once glimpsed, doesn't depend on any external condition. It's here when you breathe, when you smile, when you notice the sound of rain on the roof, or the texture of sunlight on your skin. In fact, the highest state is the most ordinary one. You don't need to be high to be awake. You only need to stop trying so hard to escape what already is. Because reality, when you cease to demand it be otherwise, is astonishing enough. The natural high of being comes when you finally stop climbing the ladder of spiritual achievement and discover that there was never a ladder at all. You were already home, sitting cross-legged on the ground of your own awareness, pretending to look for the way back. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of perception is a tiny enlightenment. You don't have to earn it. You only have to notice it. Look closely at this very moment, the play of color, the sensation of your body, the silence behind the words, and ask yourself, what am I lacking? You'll find that nothing is missing. You've been complete all along, and that is the final joke of it all. The mushroom takes you on a grand cosmic journey only to deliver you right back where you started, at the kitchen table, sipping tea, perhaps smiling a little wider because you finally see the miracle in the steam rising from the cup. So, let the tools go when their work is done. Let the extraordinary dissolve back into the ordinary, for there is no difference between them, except in the stories we tell. The true sacrament is this moment, this breath, this unspeakable fact of being alive at all. So here we arrive, not at the end of a path, but back where we started, at this very moment, this unremarkable miracle of being. And yet it is new, because you are new. Or rather, the old idea of you has dissolved like mist in morning light. You began this search thinking there was someone who could awaken, someone who might reach enlightenment if only they climbed far enough or studied hard enough. But now you see, there was never anyone to reach, nowhere to go, nothing missing. The seeker was the sought, all along. The self, you see, is like the sound of a bell, a vibration in the air, beautiful but fleeting. You can't pick it up or put it down, because there was never a thing there to begin with. There was only the ringing. Likewise, your life is the universe ringing in the shape of you, a temporary melody of existence echoing through the silence of eternity. When that is seen, all the grasping relaxes. You stop trying to become, because you realize you already are what you were seeking. You stop trying to hold on, because there is nothing that can be held. Everything is flowing, and you are the flow. So what remains when the self is gone? Nothing, and everything. The nothing of no boundary, and the everything of boundless being. You are the sky in which all clouds appear and vanish. The stillness behind every thought, every heartbeat, every breeze. The Buddha called this awakening. Jesus called it being born again. Lao Tzu called it returning to the source. But names are only signposts. The truth they point to is wordless, immediate, and obvious. It is this: you don't need to believe a thing. Just look. Look without naming, listen without labeling, feel without holding. You will find that the awareness doing the looking has never moved, never aged, never suffered. It is untouched by birth or death, by gain or loss. It has been quietly watching the whole play unfold, smiling all the while. And perhaps, at last, you laugh, not because you've discovered a secret, but because there never was one. The whole mystery was hiding in plain sight, disguised as your own life. So, my friends, remember this. Enlightenment isn't an achievement. It's a homecoming. The door has never been locked. You were never outside. All that was required was to stop knocking and notice that you were already inside the house. Already the house. Already the whole of existence. Wondering what it would be like to pretend to be small. Now the pretending is over, and the play goes on just as before, only lighter, freer, more intimate. You breathe, you smile, you live. And life, recognizing itself in you, smiles back. For the truth is simple. You were never the limited self you imagined, but the entire dance, the infinite, expressing itself as this, right here, right now. And that recognition, quiet, effortless, and utterly ordinary, is the freedom you were always seeking.